watching the style of debate in America change to, a system, an age-old system, a Western system where, you think one thing, I think another, we talk it through, the guy with the best point wins, right? To a system where we just create a villain, and if we don't like what the other person is saying, we tie him to the villain, and it ends the conversation. Shut up, Rick Sanchez, you're a Putin puppet.
Correct.
You took money from Putin.
Correct.
Why should I listen to you?
Yeah.
And it's at first when this started happening a while ago, I was like, that's so childish, I'm not even going to acknowledge it. And then it spread like the stage 4 cancer that it is. And all of a sudden, everybody thinks like that. Everybody thinks like that. It's like, you're connected to Russia, so floridly insane, but also so unimpressive.
The other people who call themselves journalists who work at all these places today, I started looking around and looking at MSNBC and CNN and Fox. Half the people who work at these places were former spokespersons for the Pentagon or the State Department or President Bush or President Intel, President this or President that. And I'm thinking, and they say Russians are state TV? We've got literally the person who spoke for the President of the United States is now the anchor at such and such a network.
Oh, I agree.
And they're all over the place. And what is more state TV than that? And most of them didn't even study journalism and have never covered a story and wouldn't know what it looks like if it hit him in the ass.
There's this one chick on MSNBC who I knew, and I can't remember her new last name. It was Nicole Devenish. Nicole Wallace is her name now.
Yeah.
And she was Jeb Bush's coffee girl and flack kind of in the 90s. And I covered Jeb Bush, so I remember her very well. She was totally incompetent then, but she was incompetent in this very specific way that people in Washington are. She was totally obedient to the message.
Yes.
No creativity, no independent thinking, pretty low IQ, nasty. But man, if you told her to say something, she would just say it.
Yeah.
And it's so sad to see someone like that rewarded in this great country, which I guess she has been. I think she's a TV show still, right?
When you are hired in the United States of America as a communicator, one of the first things you adhere to is the principle of power. So having access, if you're a local reporter in Wichita, to the police chief,
yes,
so that you can go out on the buy-busts that they're going to do,
yes,
or the investigation on a local politician, you yearn for that connection. Somewhere along the line, that never seems to be broken for some people. It's like, if all I got to do to be a good communicator is get tight with the mayor's office, the police chief, and then as you grow, maybe you end up at CNN. Now it's the State Department.
No, it's totally right.
CIA. As a journalist, I represent power. And somewhere along the line, somebody needs to slap the shit out of all of us and say, no, you don't. No, you don't. Your job is not to represent. Your job is to represent the people down there, the workers, the people who pay the taxes.
Yeah, and your
Those
audience.
people.
Yes.
They are the people you need to work for. Your audience, the average American. And they're not. They're like, the average American's here, but the people that I really want to impress are over here because that's what gives me access. And access is everything. Access is growth, and it gets me the next job.
Did you ever know Jen Griffin at Fox, the Pentagon reporter?
I think I may have met her, but no.
I don't want to single her out. She's perfectly nice. That's not true, actually.
Pentagon reporters are usually salutists.
Whoa. And what's interesting is she just carries she lies and she carries the Pentagon line, not the kind of top, not the defense secretary line. He's a political appointee, but the permanent Pentagon, the interests of this agency, the largest government agency. And she just carries her line no matter what. No matter what. It doesn't matter how implausible it is. It's a neocon line. It's a very strict
And when you
neocon
challenge her, when she's on your show, which I'm sure you had this happen, because I had this happen at CNN, I'd have the Pentagon reporter on, and I'd challenge her on a question. She would complain to management, and then management would call me in and say, hey, take it easy with your questioning and what you were doing. They thought my show was too popular, and they didn't want me to be popular on a network other than the BBC or CNN. And so they essentially shut it down, thereby shutting me down by penalty of imprisonment. And I was a little angry about it, so I went around and I started telling people about it. Anybody who would listen, I would say, look, this is the situation I'm in, and it's very bothersome. And I got a lot of people, including the Society of Professional Journalists, who said, look, in a country like ours, the government doesn't get a chance to decide who are the winners and losers, who can report and who can do anything else. So they've invited me to actually speak at one of their forums, which I thought was cool. And then a very large newspaper here in the United States, in Washington no less, decided they were going to run a story on this. And essentially they wrote a story that essentially says the headline of, Rick Sanchez, former CNN reporter, challenging the Biden administration, hoping that the new Trump administration will change this law. And it was a legitimate story, telling the story that I've been telling you, that one day I was working and suddenly this was taken away from me and it was unfair. Perfectly legitimate story. And it was about to air, or pardon me, be published the very next day, and I get a phone call. Remember we talked earlier about a mysterious phone call?
Yeah.
Now there's this young journalist, nice young man, worked hard on this story, smart kid. And he says, Mr. Sanchez, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the story that was going to come out tomorrow that you and I were both excited about it's been killed. They're not going to run the story. I said, why wouldn't they run the story? They said, well, because our managing editor, not my boss, his boss, apparently got a call last night from somebody, and they convinced him in that phone call that we should kill this story. And I said, can you give me more details? Do you know why? He goes, no, I don't even know who the person was who called him. And I don't usually work with with the guy at the top. I usually work with my regular editor. I'm just a reporter, but I've never even heard of a phone call coming from the very top like that and canceling the story. So now, not only did I get a mysterious call that led to me losing my job at RT, now my just trying to share my story with people was being killed by another mysterious phone call.
Well, it was a neocon publication. So I'm from DC, you're not. So I happen to know the publication very well. And it's a neocon publication.
And we don't want to say it because we're a young man. I don't want to fire.
It's not it didn't happen to me, so I don't have the right to divulge it. But it's a publication in Washington, DC that is resolutely neocon. And they're like, no, this is contrary to the story that we're telling. So
what you're telling me and what we're coming to realize in this conversation, you and I, is that the State Department, who I know reached out to me when I was working at RT to kind of threaten or warn me not to work at RT, which is my choice and was taken away from me, also then followed up by calling a American newspaper to tell them not to cover me or tell my story based on what they needed as well.
Of course.
This is crazy.
It is crazy.
This is crazy.
And there is a conspiracy of temperament and worldview that is not explicit, and I doubt it's even like a true conspiracy, and that I don't know if there's communication between the parties, but the people who work at the State Department, the people who work at the Washington Post, the people who work at every big news organization in DC and New York have the same worldview. And so they know that, telling your story, explaining how your First Amendment rights as an American were violated by the U.S. government is contrary to their interests as cheerleaders of the war against Russia. It'll help Putin, so we can't say it.
As a journalist, it's my responsibility to represent their point of view.
Of course.
To put a microphone in front of them and say, what is your opinion of this situation? Right. And then report back. But we're not allowed to do that. I'm being told you're not allowed to get that side of the story. And if you report that side of the story, we're going to put you in jail.
So I do think that most journalists obey because they fear social sanction. They fear someone saying, you're a Putin puppet or whatever.
Oh, I hate that.
But in your case, you actually saw an administration try to apply the force of law. Like, we'll put you in jail. So that's what I think is different about your story. It's not just like people are embarrassed to be seen as pro-Russia. They were like, no, you violate the order and you're going to prison. Yeah, but it's gotten to the point where that kind of lynch mob mentality is so entrenched in the United States that even to suggest that someone is close to this boogeyman is enough to shut it down.
But and
that's a leash. What they're doing is controlling your behavior. From a geopolitical standpoint, we've really, really squandered American power to the point where we have less power than most Americans understand, and it's really scary. I want America to be powerful. I want us to be able to project power if we need to. I want us to be able to protect our interests. I want us to stay prosperous and free. And the degree to which we've kind of wrecked ourselves is not obvious to people, and it makes me want to cry when I think about it. The people in charge are terrible at building things. They've built nothing. Our country's collapsing. Our infrastructure is garbage. Our population is dying. Okay, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
I grieve over that. I want this country to be prosperous, free, and happy. I want my kids to get married and be able to afford houses. I want them to have my grandchildren. I mean, these are like basic desires. The people running it have no ability to do any of that, to help with any of that, to actually help the population of the United States. All they can do is destroy. And how do they pull that off without like sparking a revolution, a much needed revolution in their country? They do it through propaganda. And I have been an instrument of that throughout my life unknowingly. A propaganda that lies to people in a way that's so aggressive and all-encompassing. You don't know that it's dark because there's no light. You have nothing to compare it to. You have no idea. Your worldview is so controlled that you have no freaking idea what reality is. I mean, of course, I was so grateful, by the way, because I will always, give Fox the credit it deserves, a lot of credit for being kind to me, which they always were, of not really getting in my business and of, giving me all that freedom for so long. And I'm grateful to the Murdoch family for that. But, clearly foreign policy, neocon foreign policy is the red line. They don't care what your views on transgenderism are, even abortion or gun control or tax policy, all that stuff that we think is important. They don't think that's important.
Go ahead and do that. Right.
Go ahead and do that. Fight amongst yourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Have a race war. Great. Have one. You used to have a race war.
Oh, that's so true.
No, it's totally true. Have another race war.
Yeah.
And they just don't care. What they do care about is the ability to keep the money flowing and, the coffins filling. Like they love to kill and they worship money and death. And that's just a fact. And I know them because I'm from there. So race stuff was like, most Americans do not hate each other because of race. Despite the best efforts of our leaders to get us to hate each other, man, they have tried so hard.
And most Americans don't want to hate Russia.
At all.
Right.
But again, it's North Korea.
But it's like you have to.
You don't even know what you don't know.
Right.
And I didn't even know until, like, I'm a huge believer in, like, just looking at stuff and, like, smelling stuff and, like, what's the obvious reality? Like, you can tell me any story you want, but let me go see it. And that's why I've traveled so much. And it was just so clear when I went to Moscow, like, I don't want to move there or whatever. I'm not Russian, but, like, you've been lying to me about this in a really big way. And if you've lied to me about that, what else have you been lying to me about? And the real battle that has, it's never changed for the last 2,000 years was between East and West. It's between worldviews. And you have the Christian West and you've got the non-Christian East. And the truth is Russia is really part of the Christian West. And so anyone who's trying to make Russia into the main enemy of the United States is trying to divide and destroy the Christian world. In general, I think the destructive impulse is satanic, and I think it really is a dualism. Either you're creating or you're destroying. Yeah. And if you look around and you're like, the outcome of all these different adventures is just purely destruction, I think you can say you're serving evil. I think it's honestly that God creates, Satan destroys. I'm sorry to like get all heavy on you, but I think it's just very basic.